Got it.
Okay, and I'll start admitting people.
Good morning, everybody. We're just in the process of letting everybody into the room, and we'll be starting momentarily. It's great to see so many people online. This is a very popular talk today, and we're really looking forward to it. So we'll get started in just a moment. We'll just got a few more people coming in, and once we've got them all in, we'll get going. Okay. What do you think, Henry? Have we got most people in now?
Yeah, I think we can get started slowly. I'll keep on letting people in if they come in.
Oh, thank you very much. So good morning, everybody. I'm Douglas MacLeod, the Chair of Architecture at Athabasca University. And today we're, of course, having a talk from the Social Impact Lab of Alberta on human-centered design. I wanted to start by noting that Athabasca University has staff and students in 84 different countries. And as such, many of us live and work on the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples around the world. So we honor their ancestry, their heritage, and their gifts, and we give thanks to them. But we also want to support the 94 recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and we hope that we can act as allies in realizing these recommendations. Now, today's talk is from the Social Impact Lab, and a number of us are currently working, or rather the Social Impact Lab is currently working or leading a project with the town of Athabasca, and there's a number of us from Athabasca University who have been involved. And what's the genesis of this is that they have a wonderful process for involving the community in the way things are designed in those communities. And we're very interested in human-centered design and community-based and participatory design. And for that reason, we've asked them to speak and to share their process with us today. So they were founded as part of the United Way of Calgary and area in a number of years ago, and it's a collaboration between J5, a service design studio, and the United Way. What it is a multidisciplinary team that tries to accelerate innovation and drive change for those in communities who struggle with inequitable systems. They're looking at systems level challenges focused on prevention and not intervention. They're using design, and that's kind of important to us at the Center for Architecture, to create inclusive outcome focused change. And the Social Impact Lab of Alberta received 1.75 million in multi-year funding from the Ministry of Culture and the Status of Women to scale the offerings of the Social Impact Lab across Alberta. So today, Kelsey Brown and Monique Blow are going to be speaking, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'm going to hand it over to them right now. So thank you, Monique, and thank you, Kelsey, for joining us today.
Thank you. I'll just start by introducing myself. As Douglas said, my name is Monique Blau, and I'm the project director with the Social Impact Lab Alberta, and have been part of the Social Impact Lab since 2018. My pronouns are she, her, and I was born on Treaty 6 and have the distinct pleasure of living and working here on Treaty 7. Over to you, Kelsey.
Thanks, Monique. My name is Kelsey Brown. My pronouns are she, her. I was born in Treaty 7 territory, in what is known as Calgary, Alberta, and have lived here my whole life. I have a degree in behavioral science and have a background working with people experiencing homelessness, at-risk youth, and kind of a little dabbling in the educational world before I found my way here to practice service design with the Social Impact Lab Alberta. So thank you all for joining. It's really nice to see some familiar faces in the audience here, or at least names in the audience. And we're really delighted to be sharing with you today. Before we get started, I would like to do a land acknowledgement for the land that we are on today. And I assume some of you might also be calling in from Calgary, but perhaps all over the province. So in the spirit of our journey to promote reconciliation, I'd like to honor the truth of our shared history and acknowledge Treaty 7 territory and the traditional lands of the Blackfoot Confederacy that includes Kainai, Siksika, Piikani First Nation. I acknowledge the traditional lands of the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. I'd also like to recognize the Métis people and the Inuit people who have made their home here in Mohkinstsis, also known as Calgary. So thank you to the land and to the folks who have stewarded it for generations for having us here today. All right, Monique, you can jump in and take it away.
Thanks, Kelsey. So this morning, Kelsey and I are going to share with you a couple case studies, but also how we use community co-design in our practice and how that has also influenced our work in human-centered design and the 3 lenses of design. So in fact, all of these elements work together. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on the front end around human-centered design. We'll move into a case study of some of the work we've done in the lab, and then we'll talk specifically about community co-design, and Kelsey will take you through that. And we look forward to any questions you have at the end, and you can also connect with us on LinkedIn at any point if you want to dig in deeper or have something that you didn't raise during the conversation. So as Douglas said, the lab was founded in 2018 in collaboration with J5, which is a service design firm in Calgary with the United Way of Calgary and area. And we use design to create inclusive, outcome-focused change. What we really do is take a human-centered approach to innovation. And we focus on human-centered design and the 3 lenses of design, which lend themselves to design thinking, to not only empower design, but to empower the people that we work with in communities. And so this timeline simply serves as a reflection of the products and services and solutions designed, tested, and implemented by our team since we started in 2018. Next slide. In 2020, as Douglas said, we received funding from the Minister of Culture and Status of Women under a specific program designed or created called Creative Partnerships Alberta. So what we do in the Social Impact Lab Alberta is focus on capacity building, cross-sector collaboration, and enabling social innovation in communities with a focus on the nonprofit sector. Next slide. When we think about human-centered design, it's probably not new to any of you here on this call. I'm sure it's something you do every day and that you're thinking about in your work, but it is an approach to problem solving and innovation that really prioritizes the needs, preferences, and experiences of our end users, or sometimes referred to as our customers, but the people in the communities in which we get to engage with every day. And the goal is to create products and services and systems, so we very much work in a systems lens, that are not only functional and efficient, but also really take in all the aspects of being human. So our emotions, our behaviors, and all that fits into the context of the work. And the key principles of human-centered design, what we've done here is illustrate how we operate, but it really includes empathy, iteration, and collaboration. And so in our work at every stage, we engage in activities that start with listening and learning. So that is the user research. We move into co-creating, which is often referred to as prototyping, and we do it alongside the communities and the users. And then we move into testing and measuring so that we can really understand the user's needs and iterate as we move through the process to ensure that whatever solutions, services, or products that we are creating are iterative and that are refined to meet the needs. So human-centered design is not only a key component in our community co-design practice, but it also plays a very strong role in what we do around the 3 lenses of design. We can go to the next slide. So the 3 lenses of design really provides us the roadmap. If we think of human-centered design as a key component, we then need a roadmap in which we can operate and move forward. And so what I wanted to do was spend a bit of time talking about what those 3 lenses of design are. And they're not lenses that we've made up in the lab. They are tried, tested, and true, and used very often when we're thinking about innovation and design thinking. And so these are desirability, feasibility, and viability. And the triad of these lenses really guides the development of all of our work. So whether that's working in community, in fact, it guides us at every stage. And so what do we mean by each of these terms? Well, Desirability in the context of design thinking really refers to creating solutions that meets the needs and desires of our end users or our community. And you're going to hear that a lot from Kelsey and I, that everything we do, the human is at the center of that. And so human-centered design aligns really well with this lens because it emphasizes deep empathy and understanding of the people. And so what are the needs? What are the preferences? What are the behaviors? And so we ask ourselves questions like, do people want it? Will it make a difference? And it becomes crucial in helping to create something that people and communities want. And that relates to everything we do. I'm sure we've all experienced situations that we're interacting with. We're like, well, why was that done? Did anybody ask us? Has anybody considered the user at the center of this solution, product, or service? When we consider feasibility, this really involves assessing the technical and practical aspects of implementing a design solution. So, we ask ourselves, is it possible? Is it realistic? And in a human-centered design lens, what this does is puts people in the context of the user centricity. So what I mean by that is it ensures that not only are we thinking about the feasibility, but we're also keeping the user at the center of it. And so if we realize that something's not feasible, but yet it's very desirable, we engage in a process called creative problem solving so that we can find solutions that are both feasible and user-friendly. So it really becomes a critical checkpoint for us to ensure that our aspirations actually align with the practicalities of the implementation. And as we know in business, there are many things that we need to be guided by. And so we try and ensure that we're thinking about the user in the context of that space as well. And lastly, viability. Well, viability is really thinking about sustainability. And often when we think about three lenses of design, there is another lens that's added called sustainability, but we're thinking about viability in the terms of sustainability as well. So will it last? Can it be sustained? Does it make sense long term? And does it truly have enduring success? And so human-centered design, as we think about the combination of these two frameworks and the roadmap, recognizes the importance of viability, but it also ensures that our business goals don't compromise the user experience. And that often is what happens. We see it every day. We're like, well, the business needs this, so we're going to make adjustments regardless of what the user needs. And so in our work, and especially in our community co-design practice that Kelsey will take you through, we really focus on what it means to ensure that we meet what is being needed by the community, that truly addresses the human needs and behaviors, and that the business doesn't drive the demand or the need. And so all of these three elements are interconnected, and they work really well together from a human-centered design lens, but also in our practice of community co-design. So what I'd like to do is share with you a case study on how our methodology, the practice, and these two frameworks and strategies come together. And so what I'd like to talk to you about is the open market. And so back in the fall of 2018, our team was tasked with addressing a very large, complex problem. As you can see, solve for childhood poverty in Calgary. Wow. Okay, we'll talk about an ambitious task. It really required us to think about a comprehensive and tangible approach for how we're going to do that. And so our strategy involved addressing poverty from multiple angles and thinking about poverty as this very complex issue. What are the contributing factors of that? So in any project, often that's how we have to delve things down, right? How do we make things more tangible? And childhood poverty is a multifaceted challenge. It is something that many organizations in the social sector and social enterprises are working to tackle every day. But we needed to go beyond kind of that surface level solution that exists. And as mentioned, we're very focused on prevention and not intervention. And so we took a holistic approach to thinking about what the root causes of poverty was. And we started with really understanding the profound impact of food insecurity on childhood poverty. And that access to nutritious food is not just a basic need, but it's really a fundamental building block to the health of a child. you know, in those first 2000 days, the nutrition of a child is so important to their brain development. And so to kickstart our journey, we immersed ourselves in extensive research, listening and learning. So understanding the intricacies, of food security in Calgary, that really became the foundation of our work. And really understanding the contributing factors. So what are the human elements that play in that? And so taking the approach of human-centered design. So next slide. Our goal was to understand the community's unique challenges. And so as we started to do our research, we talked to many Calgarians and looked at all the research available. What we really started to understand is that there are so many challenges, and that if we were going to start to address this, we needed to figure out what some of the gaps were. These are just some of the stats, and they're quite shocking. And I don't want to spend time delving into them, but for those of you that are curious, on a tight budget, food generally becomes the expense that we forego. It's the really only flexible expense that we have. And so we can see that it's become a crisis situation. Next slide. Our research, of course, is not just about the numbers, right? As I started this conversation or sharing this information with you, it's all about the people, right? And so it's important to have the numbers because we want to work in an evidence-based approach. But what we needed to also understand was, what does it mean to the people that live these experiences every day? And can we gain a deep understanding of what it means to live in food insecurity as an adult or as a child? And so through this work, we identified a couple key patterns, some challenges and opportunities that created space for what some might view as intervention, but we as a team view it as prevention. And these stories and experiences led us to identify 3 key guiding design principles, and they are dignity, access, and choice. And dignity is at the core of our design philosophy that we embraced. And what we really considered was, can we create solutions that will respect and uplift the individuals and ensure that they have a high sense of worth and importance? Because what we learned in our research is that accessing the food bank and going through the experience of sharing my story again and again and being judged for my income or the decisions I'm making doesn't respect my privacy, doesn't respect who I am as a person, and certainly doesn't empower me. Hence the dignity. The next one was around access. So we needed to ensure that our solution would not only provide access to food, but that it needed to be accessible, meaning location. So location was going to be key to us. And then the last one was around choice. And in our research, what we learned was that if you are accessing or experiencing food insecurity, choice is not something that's given to you. In fact, choice is taken away from you most often. And so what we wanted to ensure was that our design practice and the solution that we designed would in fact acknowledge choice and give people the ability to choose based on their dietary needs, based on their cultural requirements. And we also wanted to make sure that they had access to fresh vegetables. Sounds crazy, but it's true. Next slide, please. So our idea needed to really provide everyone, as I mentioned, dignity, access, and choice, and the ability to think about fresh quality food regardless of your financial situation. And so we came up with an idea that's called the Pay What You Want market. And it's important to say that we didn't create this idea on our own. In our research, we identified a number of different models that were similar to the Pay What You Want that existed overseas in Europe. And so in collaboration with some of those founders, we started to learn what was working and what didn't. And the most important thing here is that the market really would allow everyone to come together, to create a sense of community, and also to meet the 3 design principles. And so this really started to inspire us. So what is a Pay What You Want market? Next slide. What it is it provides a flexible pricing model that's very customer focused or customer empowerment. And how it works is that all the vendors' items are sold at a suggested price. And so in our market, if you come in, you will see that there's a suggested-ish price. And that comes from our research. We needed to understand, how do people interact with pricing? And I won't go into those details in this, but I'd be happy to connect further, or you can also read a case study. And the price tags are suggestions. And they're actually meant to help customers make decisions regarding how much they would like to pay or if they could pay at all. And shoppers can pay less, pay the suggested price. But whatever they choose to do helps the community in which we're operating, right? It further empowers the individuals that are coming to the market to have that accessibility, that dignity and choice. Next slide. Many of you work in design, and even if you don't see yourself as a designer, you probably are in many ways. And what I wanted to share here, and of course, this is far too small. It's kind of like an eye chart to read, but is that in everything we do, there are these moments of inspiration that really create the catalyst for creativity. And it comes from diverse sources, a shared experience, a unique perspective. Sometimes it's something we've read, a moment of reflection. But what this illustration does is it articulates the journey of how we started to recognize the role of community and supporting each other in community would have a. And so it's the story of sharing food between two individuals, someone that was new to the country that didn't fully understand or have knowledge of all the fruits and vegetables we had, and an elderly person that had grown items in her garden and had too much. And so she was on a corner in her community selling and actually giving away these items. And someone approached her and said, I don't know what this is. And so she explained what this vegetable was. And so in that moment, what we realized was that, and we know this, that sharing food becomes this universal experience and that it connects people in a profound way, whether that is sharing a meal or sharing food. And so we knew that if we were going to connect the idea of pay what you want and create this kind of universal approach of what it means to support my community around food, then creating the pay what you want market in a specific community that would respond to the needs of that community, that would respond to the users, would ensure that we were going to be desirable, feasible, and viable, and that it would deeply resonate with the people in that community, which becomes the core of how we operate. So next slide. So following all of our ethnographic research, and many of you know this process already, but we identified a number of risky assumptions, and our journey then takes us into a critical phase of prototyping. And there are various types of prototyping, low fidelity, high fidelity, which we operate at every stage. This is just an example of our low fidelity, but we really use prototyping to bring our ideas to life, to make sure that it's aligning with the design principles that we identified around accessibility, choice, and dignity. And at the same time, prototyping ensures that we're thinking about the three lenses of desirability, feasibility, viability. And prototyping really becomes our bridge from what we were thinking about to reality. And it also gives us an opportunity to engage with those experiencing food insecurity firsthand, to also engage with those in community that could potentially pay more from the model, right? We needed to be able to bring a diverse group of people together to test what this potential solution would look like. And so at every turn, we considered things like size of the market, point of sale, the critical decision-making moments that occur when we're buying food and paying. And what do we need that experience to look like? And more so, what does the user need that experience to look like? That became key. So what sets the prototyping process apart, for us anyways, is the active involvement in the community. So it's not only, we actually created a grocery store in our lab with cutout fruit and vegetables, cutout POS systems that we built and tested. But at every stage, what we're emphasizing is our commitment to human-centered design, our co-design approach, and ensuring that it's a collaborative effort with the community. And so this is where I would say the work that we do in the lab differentiates us from many other experiences that might even be collaborative. Next slide. As we progressed through prototyping, the next crucial step was piloting. And so this was also super exciting. It's unfortunate one of our first pilots was done in a massive snowstorm. However, we cannot, manage those things that are out of control. But this phase is really about implementing our designs in real world scenarios, right? Choosing a specific location, testing the entire user experience with actual food, with customers on site, thinking about that hands-on approach and evaluating every point. So entry, service, signage, pricing strategy. And location really becomes important too, right? Because we wanted to be in a location where we knew the community needed. So the pilot really is the litmus test for our prototypes and helps us to move from a very controlled environment in our lab, which makes sense, hence the lab, to the actual location. Next slide. As I said, choosing the right location becomes extremely important, especially when we're thinking about accessibility. But in our work, we also identified communities that were food deserts. And so we strategically placed our pilot environments in different situations, some of them being food deserts, some of them being locations where we knew there was a larger population experiencing food insecurity, and in other communities that had high affluent communities, to see what the interactions would be with the solution and what it would mean to adapt that solution and consider scaling it outside of those smaller communities. So every aspect in our pilot test is scrutinized. Every customer experience is tracked, recorded, evaluated, and then determined what we need to change for the next pilot. And so we ran 4 pilot tests in the course of the year to determine our 3 lenses, keeping the human at the center of every single piece. Next slide, please. As I said, we measured everything, and what's really important is is to ensure that it's designed by community for community, right? So everything we're doing that's collecting, I would say, the meticulous feedback from our customers and our users ensures that the solution that's put in front of them, whether it's a product or service or something like the pay what you want market, has them at the heart of it, hence the human-centered design. All the insights that we gather create space for iteration and for us to consider what we need to do next and how do we make adjustments to ensure that what we are creating provides the most value, and that in the real life circumstances that these individuals are experiencing, that we can in fact make a change and make a difference. Next slide. So our pay what you want market became the open market. It's truly a culmination of efforts from development to testing over the course of almost 2 years. And the open market is generously funded by United Way of Calgary and area in collaboration with, of course, the Social Impact Lab. In terms of operations, we work with Fresh Roots. They have, in fact, taken the helm, and their expertise has been tremendous in ensuring we could bring this to life. Because, of course, the lab and United Way are not food operators. And so finding the right partner ensures success. And so we're always looking for volunteers if you're interested. And it runs every Thursday from 5 to 7 in the Meadowlark Community Association here in Calgary. Next slide. So in all of our work, I say that we need to ensure that the business doesn't drive where we're going, but we also know that we need to ensure that we have strong impact and outcomes. And so what this slide does is really provide a culmination of all of our efforts. Since we launched Open Market, we've held 36 markets, really providing a consistent, accessible space. We're testing in one location, and then we'll see if we can move on with that sustainability piece. We've had more than 2,000 people visit, and that number goes far beyond just foot traffic, right? It represents the people that have seeked out support, that are considering a new approach to food access. It also is a testament to the community's connection and support. And so really speaks to how important it is to support each other in community, but what it means to connect around. The pay what you want model, when we think about 20% of people pay more, it really demonstrates a willingness to support the community. The 6.3 suggested price contributes to the sustainability. And when we think of the 61.8% who pay less, this really speaks to flexibility and inclusivity. So I wanted to speak to kind of how those 3 lenses start to work through it. And the last point, around 11.6%, and I've said it there, it really is about showcasing the importance of zero barrier approach. And as I mentioned, we're very much focused on prevention. So these statistics aren't just numbers, right? They actually represent real lives, real families, and real impact. Oh God, I got choked up about this. And I think when we see this type of impact and the opportunity that the work that we do can transcend the little lab in which we operate, but actually morph across communities and people, it further inspires us to do the work that we do. And I'm so excited that we were funded by the government to be able to do this work. So we're not solving childhood poverty, but we're definitely taking a deep dive into understanding what it means to deal with food insecurity and the contributing factors. And we hope that the work that we've done continues to support the communities in which we operate.
Awesome. Thanks, Monique. I'm excited. I'm sure lots of you have questions about some of the ins and outs and what actually some of those details look like. I'm sure we can get into that after, but I'm really excited to share. So Monique has shared a little bit about one of these examples in Calgary of how we kind of tried to find the right problem and then worked on problem solving in alignment with what we heard from the community. I'm going to share an example with you from our work across the province in bringing human-centered design and this process to communities across Alberta. So our community co-design model is really the process of collaborating with local change makers in rural and urban municipalities in Alberta to support them in innovating and problem solving and problems that they've identified in their community. So we use the same kind of proven methodology to harness the strengths of community members to help them create a community that reflects their own vision of the future. So we have a few goals. We want to connect with local leaders, and those are self-identified leaders, not necessarily kind of the typical players, but people who want to make a difference in their community. We help them figure out what are some sticking points in their community? What are things that maybe aren't working the way they would like them to be? And then we empower them to create solutions. We want to develop capacity in individuals and organizations to do this work, to understand this human-centered design process so that they can repeat this process over and over and over again, long after we're gone. We also want to bring people together across sectors. So we're looking to see, who are people who might not typically collaborate or work together on problem solving, work together in the community. So we're bringing together government and nonprofit and academia and all sorts of different groups of people. And we also want to create a systemic approach. So part of our goal of this work is to create kind of a guideline of how do we do community co-design? How do we problem solve well together so that communities across the world, ideally, can kind of pick up our model and use this to create new innovative solutions. So why co-design? It really places communities at the forefront of problem solving. Something that we've heard a lot is communities say to us, well, there are lots of people who come in and tell us what our problems are and what we need to do to fix them. But no one ever comes in and just asks what we want to do or what we want to see. So this model definitely prioritizes that. It creates this environment of shared ownership that we are in this together. We are building solutions together, which means it's sustainable. It empowers communities to identify things that we don't actually see. I don't know a lot about these communities that I'm working in before we get in there. And so I can't speak to what's best for them. And it also builds community capacity for innovation and collaboration. Like we said, we're bringing together lots of different people to work together in new ways. And even just getting the people together in the room leads to a bunch of new opportunities. It also enhances community resiliency. Communities are able to bounce back from future problems because they have the strategies to approach them. I think I've lost a slide here, but I will just speak to it. The design process that we've developed, this community design co-design approach, has 5 different steps that we work through. So the first is bringing together leaders in the community, really building relationship and getting to know people. Then we engage local networks. So we encourage these people we've built relationships with to broaden our circle and invite others in. We look for up to 40 different people to participate in what we call a design lab. And a design lab is just a series of workshops or meetings where we work through human-centered design process of identifying, finding the right problem, really getting to understand it, and then creating new ideas and testing those ideas. So testing is kind of our 4th area. We prototype these ideas and test them with the community, make sure that people in the community like the ideas that we've come up with to problem solve. And then we anchor our ways of working. So through the involvement of the people who are involved in our workshops, we help them make it real in their community, whatever their kind of solution looks like, and we empower them to find ways to make that sustainable. So I will get into a case study of what this actually looks like, so it's not so theoretical, but something that's important to know is that anyone who is involved in the communities that we work in, whether they work there or live there or have some stake in the game, then they are welcome to participate with us. And some folks might participate every step of the way, usually 6 to 9 months, and some people might just join us for a little while. So we are going to be talking about Brooks, Alberta. So Brooks is the first place that we piloted our community co-design process. Brooks is a city of about 14,000 people, and it is an incredibly multilingual and multicultural city. They call it the city of 100 hellos because it's believed that over 100 languages are spoken in Brooks, Alberta. One of the reasons for this is their major employer, JBS Foods, is an organization that does not require people to speak English fluently in order to work there. So they hire a lot of people who are English language learners. And so because of that, and because they employ, I think, about 3,000 people, there are lots of folks who come to Canada and find themselves in Brooks because they can find work and find community there. And there are a significant number of households with no English of French, no knowledge of French or English. So that's where we chose to start this process. And we began, like Monique said, we always start with research. We want to make sure we're coming through a really research-based lens. So we started with learning about Brooks as much as we could. We looked at census data, we looked at family and community support services reports, government documents, we read the news in Brooks, we looked at city council minutes, and we learned as much as we could about the community. And then we started to build a relationship. Everything we do in this community co-design process is really rooted in relationship, in trust, and in receiving the social license to operate in the community. So we seek out those connections, and we only pursue work in a community and continue that work if we are invited and if we are welcomed. We know that there's always potential that a community is going to say, actually, we've got this, we don't actually want to move forward in partnership, and that's okay. That's part of human-centered design. So we started building these relationships. We started with just kind of calling people and emailing and reaching out. And then we did a community engagement trip where we spent 3 days in Brooks. We visited Blackfoot Crossing, which is an Indigenous historical park nearby. We went to the local farmers market. We went to the coffee shop. We exchanged coffee for feedback. What did people think about their community? What did they like about it? What did they wish would change? All of those pieces. We also hosted an engagement center an engagement session at JBS Food, and we got to speak to over 130 people who were able to kind of share with us people we might not have otherwise connected with, to really understand what's happening in Brooks. And so we gained a lot of insight. We copied all of our data from these interviews and from this learning onto sticky notes. That's a core part of our process, is the sticky notes. And we started to theme them and sort them to say, what is this data actually telling us? And from that, we pulled out several different insights. So we learned things that people were saying to us over and over and over again in these interviews. What are they seeing that maybe is a challenge that their community is facing? So things like there's a lack of connection among the community. There's not enough services for mental health prevention treatment. Social supports for children and youth might be limited. And so we said, okay, these are really important data points, but we can't decide which one is the right problem to solve. So from there, we connected with the kind of core people. We call them our community champions. They're folks who we've connected with who were really passionate about this process and wanted to take initiative in problem solving in their community. So we brought 19 of these leaders together for a 2-day workshop. And we started by identifying shared vision and values. So we talked about if Brooks could be everything you wanted it to be, what would that look like? What kind of opportunities would it have? What kind of values would guide us? And then we started to co-design. So if we were to work on solving a problem together, how often would we want to meet as a group? How long should those sessions be? Should they be online or in person? All of these different pieces. So they co-designed the process with us and told us what would work for their schedules and their lives. And then we let them vote from those insights on what problem would you like to solve in your community. And so the topic that they voted on was this idea that the newcomer community and the established resident community are not well integrated, creating a sense of us and them. So this, feeling that there is a lot of diversity in Brooks, but when people are new and coming to the community, they don't feel necessarily welcome or like they belong. And so how do we problem solve that? So we kicked off our design lab. So we asked our community champions to invite the people that they knew in the community who might have some insight into this topic or might want to contribute. And we had a bunch of people join us for a kickoff on May, I don't have it in front of me here, May 2023 on the Brooks campus of the Medicine Hat College. And so we started these sessions in this process of unpacking what does this problem, what's really at the root of this problem and how can we tackle it? So we had our participants go out and do their own interviews in the community. We said, we don't actually know enough about this problem yet. So they interviewed other folks. They interviewed people who are new to Brooks, people who lived in Brooks for, 50 years and got to understand more of the context there. And they came back with, again, a whole bunch of information that we loaded onto sticky notes and started to sort, say what's really underneath this problem. And that led us to a whole bunch of new insights that were a little more specific. And from there, we created some how might we questions. So these how might we's really focuses on what is the future? What's the next step for us? So things like how might we find, engage, and celebrate the foundations of our diverse community? That we don't actually know what grounds us all together, and we don't know about all these different cultures that exist, and we want to share that and celebrate those things. Or how might we strike this balance between honoring traditions, the things that we've had in our community for so long, and the fact that Brooks is changing and there's new ideas and new cultures and communities, and we want to bring those together. And really, how do we create opportunity for connection? So these how might we questions became the foundations for our ideation. And ideation is personally my favorite part of the design process. We get to go through a whole bunch of different activities and frameworks in order to come up with new and exciting and innovative ideas to think, how could we actually make these things real? How could we celebrate those foundations, or how could we strike that balance? And so we came out of that process with several great ideas. There's an idea around community beautification. So this was both an idea around community cleanup and also this idea of what if at the entrance to Brooks we had flags that represented every country that was represented in Brooks, so that people saw themselves when they entered our community. There's an idea of a hobby fair. So people want to join, a knitting group or a book club, and they don't know where to find those communities. What if we had a night where they could go and find out about all the different opportunities in the community? There's this idea of bringing two opportunities to events that already existed in Brooks and bringing those together. So we have a trade show, we have this Taste of Nations, but the people who attend them are really different demographics. What if we could bring those together and use that to bridge the gaps in our community and build some more connections? Another idea was around neighborhood groups. So someone said there's this idea of us and them, and I don't know that we can really overcome that. There's always going to be an us and a them, because just by human nature, we categorize ourselves. So what if we were to create neighborhood groups that categorize us by where we live? And each group had kind of a committee that would host these grassroots events of a parade of garage sales, and this neighborhood group could host a soccer tournament, and this neighborhood group could host a block party. And then there's kind of an overarching committee that helps bring those groups together to celebrate all of the different things in Brooks. So you're getting to know your neighbors, which just in and of itself creates those connections and opportunities for belonging. And then the last idea that came out of our ideation was this idea of a cultural festival. What if we could have an event where 4 or 5 different cultural groups were represented? They could have their booth and share some educational pieces, maybe sell some crafts, artifacts. There would be food and dance and all sorts of things, so people could come and learn about all of the different cultures that are represented in Brooks. So these were ideas, wonderful ideas that came out of this process. And then, of course, we got to the fun part of prototyping. So we brought a box of craft supplies, and we had our participants start to build representations of what their ideas were. And so they created these prototypes, and then they created test plans. So they wrote down, what do I need to learn about my prototype to know if this is actually a good idea and if it would work in the community? So what kind of questions do I need answered? Things like, would people actually attend? Is it desirable? Is it feasible? Is it viable? Would it work? Would people come? Would it last? Is this something I could see existing in Brooks for 5 years or 10 years? Does it overlap with things that already exist here? And then we got to invite the broader community to help us test our prototypes. So just like an open market where they had those cardboard cutouts and had people come through and kind of test, would this point of sale system work or would this setup work? We did the same thing in Brooks. So folks from the broader community came and joined us and offered their feedback and, kind of walked through, okay, if I went to this cultural festival, I would go to maybe 4 booths and then I might feel overwhelmed and I would go home, or I would really want to go if there was food there, and specifically maybe these kind of foods, and things like that, so that they could get some feedback. They went and took some time to modify their prototypes based on the feedback they heard. And then for one of our final sessions, we invited the community back again. We created a rubric of kind of how to score these different prototypes and what we were looking for. And our community members had presentations to share about their final ideas, all of the different pieces that they had thought through. We had someone create a video. We had some folks just speak to their presentations. And so then the broader community got to score and assess these different ideas, so that we could choose one to move forward with. So each prototype was scored out of 100, and then we added up those scores and assessed that. One of the things that did really surprise us was just that this process kind of there was a shift in our action committee. So our very last session was about this idea that we had chosen that we were going to move forward with. We recognized, so we had created an action committee, a group of people who were going to carry this idea forward. Folks who have been involved in the process who said, I would like to champion this and make this happen. And kind of in the last few months since we'd made that decision and over the holiday break, we recognized that more and more events were coming back in person in Brooks. So we had decided on this idea of a cultural festival, which is super exciting and I think answers our how might we's. And as we were assessing after we had done this vote, we recognized that some of the other events that were starting to pop up after, the long COVID break of not having things in person, some of those events really looked similar to this event that we were hoping to pitch. And so part of the design process sometimes is that we go back a step and we have to reassess if our plan is the right plan. And so we are in the process of working with folks in Brooks to assess, was the idea we chose the right solution? And do we need to go back to a little bit more prototyping to test more in the community where we need to go? And we're also looking at where do we have buy-in and leverage in the community of folks who want to push this idea forward. So the reality is, as we go through this process, some people can stick through with us for the whole process, and some folks are limited in the time that they can commit. And as we're moving into the actual process of final prototypes, we're recognizing some people have changed jobs, some people are having babies, and so we are refining and creating a process to launch our next prototype and figure out what that's going to be with the community. So we are letting the community completely lead that process, and we will have an update for you, I'm sure, in the coming months of where we're headed. And this process of co-design, of equipping community members to identify problems that they would like to solve and solve them, has been really successful from our point of view. It's pointed us to solutions that we never would have thought of for Brooks. It's pointed us to relationships. We've seen these relationships build in the community, and conversations that we've seen that never would have happened aside from getting together in these rooms. And the feedback has just been really positive. People have shared with us that they appreciated just the opportunity to meet once every 2 weeks to connect, that they like the idea of being involved in creating ideas for their community, especially folks who maybe aren't in traditional leadership positions and don't typically get asked what they would like to see for the future of their community. They feel empowered to make those decisions and to make a change. And so we have been really grateful for that process. We should note that we are also, as Douglas said, we're doing some work in Athabasca. We started the process of community co-design in Athabasca in April. similar to Brooks with some community engagement, we started cold calling people and emailing. We did a community engagement trip in June to go visit and got to meet with lots of different folks. My favorite part was spending an hour or two at the multiplex where the high schoolers spend their lunch break and getting to connect with a bunch of high schoolers. And we learned a lot from those conversations. We had a similar community champion session where we decided on a kind of topic, which was around social issues. So very broad. And we've just recently focused in. So we launched our design lab in October. We've had, I think, 4 sessions so far. And we've just landed on a kind of final topic, which is around communication in Athabasca. So the idea that some folks find it difficult, maybe they're not as connected, and they have difficulty finding out about different events that are happening or resources, mental health supports, housing. And so we're looking to bridge some communication gaps in the community, and we'll be starting to ideate on that in the coming months. Something that's really special about Athabasca that I love is just the diversity represented in the group. We have folks from the municipality and the county, staff who represent Athabasca University, as well as 8 high schoolers from the local high school, people who represent nonprofits, and just community members who aren't really representing any sort of organization, but are just there because they care. And so we're really excited to see where this problem solving takes us in Athabasca. And we'll be sure to keep you posted on that. So thank you. Monique, do you want me to share just quickly about Inspire?
Sure.
Right. Okay. If any of you are curious about this process, you're not as familiar with the design thinking or human-centered design process, we do have an online course that is available to anyone. It's self-paced. It's designed to be completed over 6 weeks. That's if you can do 2 to 3 hours of learning per week. And it's just an online course. It's $200, and you can just sign up and take it, and it takes you through the whole process from building empathy and doing interviews to creating how might we questions, all the way through to creating ideas and prototyping and testing. So if you'd like a deeper dive into some of that information about how you could do this yourself or how you could lead this work in a community, Inspire is probably your best bet to learn about that. And we can share that with Douglas and Henry to share with the group as well. That's all for me, Monique.
That's great. Thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, so that concludes what Kelsey and I wanted to share with you. I think there are elements you will see from the work that we've been doing, both in Brooks as the case study and with Open Market, that mimic things that we see. Of course, we are leveraging practices and methodologies that are tried and true and tailoring them based on the needs of the communities and for the users. And so, again, we're super grateful to our funder, the Alberta government, and the Creative Partnerships Program. Thank you.
And thank you, Monique, and thank you, Kelsey. I'm hoping that you'll have some time to answer a few questions.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. So for people, you can either raise your hand as Caitlin has just done, or Caitlin, why don't you, since you were so prompt getting your hand up, why don't you ask the first question, and then we've got a couple of things in the chat as well.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very excited about this presentation and the work you guys are doing. My question is maybe targeting around viability and its relationship to the community co-creation model in determining metrics of success. So I love a case study that has a pivot in it, and I think that's all exciting. But once you've kind of reached a go live moment for one of your innovation ideas, who is most interested in the key performance indicators and the metrics? Is it the funders, or is it the community themselves who decide and monitor what success looks like?
That's a great question, Caitlin, and thank you. Maybe I'll start, and Kelsey, you can jump in. So in fact, it does vary. So there's never an easy answer. What I would say is we're actually really fortunate. Certainly our funder is interested in the metrics and the outcomes. But what they are most interested at this point is the cross-sector collaboration and the knowledge sharing that's occurring across the community. That has really become the basis of success for the work that we're doing. However, from the lab's perspective, we're also interested in understanding the impact that it has, and then the community takes ownership of what those what those metrics look like. Our job now moving forward is to continue to offer, I hate using the word advice or guidance. You know, honestly, our job now is to stand alongside the community and to have them say to us, this is what we're thinking is working. These are the metrics we're seeing. Should we pivot? Should we make changes? And we're also interested in supporting them to connect with some of the largest funders and or employers in the community that really believe in what they're doing. And then they have metrics tied to that. So as an example, in Brooks, we spent a great deal of time connecting with the JBS Canada. They're the largest employer and are a significant investor in the community of Brooks. So figuring out, you know, what type of metrics are they interested in that then would help engage them in the process moving forward. I hope that answers your question. But Kelsey, feel free to add anything else.
No, I think that covered it really well, Monique. There's the metrics and the goals that are relevant to the community on kind of that grassroots level of what the community wants to see change and grow in their own local context. And then there's the idea on our end of evaluating, are we building that capacity? Are people able to do this again without us? Do they have the relationships and the confidence and the skill sets and frameworks to be able to do this? Because we're not funded to do this forever and ever and ever. So we are trying to create the kind of framework or the opportunities for communities to take what we are able to share with them and run with it. So I think those are kind of the two different ways that we're assessing success, and they're both equally valid.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. I'm just going to share a couple of comments that are in the chat. Laura has written that this is a community development model that is used on several areas. For those in Edmonton, check out the work we do at Action for Healthy Communities. George has mentioned that building relationships with community leaders and having them invite community is a very cool idea. I can see that being a really good way to build community buy-in. A pitfall for designers could be representation among leaders, but the Brooks project seems to have really put in the time to find 19 leaders. Muniraj has mentioned that your course is an excellent course, very practical learnings. And then Emily, let's see, there's a couple of questions here. Emily is asking, hi, this was great and so inspiring. Thanks for the wonderful work. I am a design enthusiast, but do not currently use it by profession. I am a Calgarian who currently works in Uganda for an organization focused on building capacity for local gender equality focused NGOs in Uganda. I think the community co-design model could be so incredible to help these NGOs address some of the real complex problems they face. Do you think problems like Ignite could be applicable in such a context? I also wondered how you go about applying this process after ideation in resource-constrained situations. So there's a bunch there to unpack, but I'll hand it over to you guys.
Yeah, I think there is a lot there. So maybe I'll just quickly reply to George around the building relationships. I did comment, but you know, in every community it really varies. And what we started in Brooks took us about 5 months to get to a place where we had built the trust needed. And it wasn't just trust with the usual, pardon me, operators or what we would call the usual suspects. So that then they could start to, you know, open their network to us and then be the individuals that were inviting the community to come and engage with us throughout the entire process. Emily, I'm actually going to suggest maybe we have a separate conversation. I'd be very curious to learn a bit more about the organization that you're working with. But of course, the program Inspire truly, so we've been testing it and running it. Now we don't test it anymore, but it's been in operation since 2018, and a number of nonprofits and individuals that are interested in the process and practice of human-centered design have gone through it. So it certainly could be helpful, depending on what it is that you're hoping you'd like to achieve specifically for that group. And I just want to go back through the other question that you had.
Oh, would you like me to repeat it? Do you think programs like Ignite could be applicable in such a context? I also wondered how you go about applying this process after ideation in resource-constrained situation.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I mean, when it comes to like ideation is and Kelsey jump in here too, right? Ideation is that be all end all. And so what really becomes important as we're narrowing down our ideas is we work through a process of riskiest assumptions around those ideas. So if we choose an idea, we start talking about what is the riskiest assumption we have associated to that. And sometimes it starts with the desirability, that people actually really want it, because we often fall in love with our ideas without necessarily knowing that it is what is needed by the user. So that's the first thing we do. And then assessing the resources or the constraints, we often start to look at that more around feasibility and viability. But the work that we're doing, and I'd love to talk to you more about, but the work that we're doing, we in fact put dollars into the community so that when we come to the stage of choosing the idea and starting to prototype, and we have low fidelity prototypes, and now we're going to move more into high fidelity prototypes, we needed to ensure there was some sustainability there. So we are putting dollars behind what we're doing. And when I say we are, the Creative Partnerships Program of Alberta is putting dollars behind that. So I know that's not a specific answer, but I would offer that if you focus on the desirability piece first and then move through the other two lenses, you might be able to find ways to address various levels of that idea with the resources that you have.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
I would
Monique.
say too. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Douglas.
Oh, please go ahead, Kelsey.
I was just gonna say too, the process of ideation, we go really big and come up with as many, the sky's the limit ideas. And then part of that, looking at those three lenses, is refining them. But that also comes through in the prototyping. And what's really interesting is as we prototype these ideas and we test those three lenses, we kind of develop a little bit of a use case for our ideas, which then we found, especially in Athabasca, has led us to a lot of opportunities for external funding, because we're able to say the community wants this, it can work, and it can be a long-term solution that then we can present to kind of external funders for resources and things like that. Of course, that's in an Alberta context. I don't know what that might look like if you're working in Uganda. But that is a piece of it as well. The prototyping and testing process leads us to a really clear picture of kind of what our ideas are and why we think they could work. And then we continue testing that. And so some of the partnerships that we've built along the way, just by having those people in the room, have led us to a lot bigger opportunities than we expected with just the $10,000 that we're coming into this project with to fund kind of our final prototype.
And Emily, if I could just mention as well, I put into the chat the URL for a group called RISE, which is working in Lesotho and doing similar things to what the Social Impact Lab is doing, but perhaps a little closer to where you're working in Uganda. If you're interested in talking to them, we've been working with them in Lesotho and actually did an extraordinary exchange with students. So you might want to contact them, and if we're hoping to get them to speak in February. So I suggest to everybody to follow us on Instagram so that you can see the date of the next one, as the RISE people are going to be talking about their process as well. Now, I'm just looking for hands, but I think we've got some more comments in the chat and all. Brad would like to know, did JBS participate in your engagement in Brooks?
Yeah, so they did initially. And in fact, they provided access to 131 employees that we interviewed during the first stage of our learning and listening, so our research. And then they've remained in contact with the reports and progress, but they weren't active at each of the 2-week sessions.
Thank you. And then Kelsey has provided the link to the Social Impact Lab course. And she's also noted that it's part of the recruitment process to have the community identify who's not in the room and what perspective we may be missing. And then Cheryl would like to know, is there a you've responded to that one in the chat, but is there a formula used or base amount of dollars that you put into a community?
Yes, so my response to that was just that the scaling of the lab and the resources and the work that we've done across the province, I would also offer as many things as a bit of a test, right? How viable and sustainable is that? And so what we've used is the pay what you want market as a proxy to be able to work in low fidelity and high fidelity approaches in community. And so at this point, every community will receive the same baseline dollars. And then we support the community to look for other sources of funding, whether that be through corporate partnerships, municipality, or even government funding that's accessible for certain types of projects.
Thank you. And I see that Risa has a question.
Thanks. Yeah, lovely presentation. I was just wondering if you could speak more to how you incorporate equity in your design process. For instance, like you mentioned the Brooks example and how many newcomers don't speak English, and then you were doing community chats. So just, yeah, curious if you could speak a little bit more to that.
Sure, I can start with that, Kelsey. So specifically with JBS, what we did was ensure that, so we didn't have a translator with us, but at JBS, so one of the reasons JBS is such a large employer in Brooks is because for those that work on the front plant line, there is no they don't need to speak English. And so we wanted to ensure that we had their voices. So each of the, I guess each group has a line manager that speaks English that could provide translation for us if we were engaging with an individual well, the language we couldn't speak. And when we think of 101 languages in Brooks, that certainly came to the forefront on a number of occasions. We also have a very strong partnership with BCIS, and they deal with a lot of the new Canadians, immigrants, and refugees in Brooks. And so really ensuring that ideally that we were hearing their voices through the organizations that work with them on a daily basis. What I would offer, Rice, is we could, in hindsight, I think it would have been great to have some translators with us on site for certain languages like Tungalak, or even, I can think of a few others, but we found it difficult to determine which translators we needed, given so many languages being spoken. So through our partnerships and through some of the line managers, I guess we hoped, we assumed and anticipated that what we were hearing would be relevant and applicable to the larger audience.
Yeah, I love to, Monique. Amanda just popped in the chat. Amanda is one of our community champions from Brooks, and I'm so glad you're here. She did say too that many of those leaders, so the folks that were participating in our lab, when they went out and did their empathy interviews to gain some deeper insight, a lot of them were connected closely to this issue, either through work or personal experience, or you know, as folks that they had supported to immigrate here. And so they really focused on making sure that they connected with some of those non-English speakers or English language learners in their interviews as well. And I think it was really cool to see after we landed on our topic, we ended up with several folks who started the process with us who were English language learners who had been in Canada for less than a year and were able to share their unique perspectives as well, which was cool to have those folks as our champions throughout the process, and not just kind of people trying to solve on behalf of them. So that was really special.
Thank you. I've noticed that was a question that had its own sort of life in the chat, but I think you guys have answered that one. And I'm just looking for either hands or comments or questions in the chat. Okay. Any last comments or final remarks that anybody would like to share with the group?
I have a question, I guess I can tack on here, if that's okay, if you have time. Just about the pay what you can market, like, very cool. Like, if I'm in just near to Edmonton, so not in my area, but I was thinking like I would take my kids there because it would be like those are the kind of like awareness that I want them to, you know, to cultivate, and just that inclusive feeling for them to, you know, kind of have that awareness, but then also the inclusivity of being able, people who are the $0 consumers, like being able to do that in a, you know, not a separate kind of segment of society, like we're all together there. my question is like, with the numbers you put up, 11% or something are paying above the price, and like, does it have a financial like viability to go on for a long time? Because these are really cool. You see things like this pop up and they're initiatives usually, right? But it would be great to see this have some longevity.
It's a great question, Kara. And so the reason we're going to run for another year, so the question of viability still remains not fully answered. So the way the market will continue is we've received a generous amount from a funder, a family who has really bought into what the market offers in the community. And so they've offered to subsidize the market for the next year. Now, what we're trying to do is figure out what the right model is between those that pay and those that can't pay. But also at the same time, honoring the vendors that are selling their products for fewer dollars, we want to honor them as well. So to your question, is it sustainable? I would say we still don't know 100% what that answer looks like. And this next year, we will continue to test a few other options with vendors and with the communities overall. So for example, we're in Meadowlark, but we have a curiosity of going in another community that has a high affluent community, and again, a group of individuals that are supporting them with security, to see if we can think about messaging and how do we get more of the individuals that can pay more come into the market.
Do you think like some of like food banks are just like occupy such a big space in people's mind when they think about like food, justice or whatever, but it's such a charitable model compared to this? I think it's like more, I like this one better. Maybe I don't have the words to describe, but like, do you see maybe like pulling some of that, the energy and time and funding that goes into that model and pulling it into this type of a model?
So that would be our dream. When I think, and now I appreciate we're talking about the market quite a bit, but when I think about the fundraising efforts that go into the food bank, I mean, the food bank does amazing work, but it is very much an intervention-based lens. And so, if we can start to think about how do we put the power back into people's hands, can we then find the right kind of partners to help us promote this? Like if CBC fell in love with the open market, imagine what might be possible. And it doesn't mean that we don't still fundraise for, our food banks, because they play a really important role. But at this point, Kara, we don't have the full answer, which is why these, our pilots and now the launch of the market with Fresh Roots really becomes an important test for us to determine how do we actually continue to move this forward. And we would prefer not to make it necessarily a charity. And that's another thing that we need to work through. Because that does then limit us, right?
It is one of the tragedies of both research and other kinds of grants that they always seem to be so short in duration, and they never really give enough time for projects to get really stabilized. And as such, there's all these good things that are happening, but they have such a short time frame. And once they're gone, they're kind of gone forever. We have a very short-term view of some of these projects, and it's largely, I think, tied to the kind of the political cycles of that everything has to be self-sustaining for example, in 24 months. And of course, very few things are. And so it's a very difficult dynamic to manage all of these different kinds of grants. But I will, Hussam has asked a question in the chat. He's curious on the scope of entrepreneurship training and support, and is this needed in the community?
Kelsey, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think whether or not it's needed really depends on the final solution that we go through. What I'm finding in community co-design is having the right people in the room and the right group of people. There's a lot of kind of peer support So a lot of the skills training or support comes through in that I have this resource or this connection, or I know this person, or I, have this experience, and the folks who are going through the process kind of support each other. In Calgary, though, we are working together with the Social Innovation Hub to create kind of a pipeline between our different programs. So Social Innovation Hub, which is through Innovate Calgary, offers different programs for entrepreneurs and innovators as they're creating social enterprises or nonprofit kind of innovation. And they have a series of programs as well as a membership that offers some of that coaching and support, as well as support around the storytelling piece. And so we have connections with them if there are folks who are looking specifically for entrepreneurship training, that we can connect them to the Social Innovation Hub. So it's kind of a little bit of both. It really depends on the situation and what we're facing. Typically what's coming out of co-design isn't a business model as much as it is kind of a community-based solution that we are looking to prototype further. So can't say we're not far enough in the process in Brooks or Athabasca, but I think those supports are there for folks if we end up needing them. But the solutions that we're coming to aren't independent businesses as much as they are kind of collaborative systems change pieces.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Can I just ask a follow-up question to that?
Yeah.
So I think it's less to do with the programming, but it's more to do with the participants that are sort of utilizing the programming and maybe having business ideas come out of that as a mechanism for economic empowerment, right?
Got it.
And I'm wondering, I guess, what types of avenues are available for people that are looking at that route to like becoming economic impactors within the community?
I love that question. Okay, that's really helpful for the context. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think in part that relationship with the Social Innovation Hub, definitely we have those connections. Monique also posted in the chat, there's an organization called ABC, and it's kind of this, we call it an innovation ecosystem or network. And so it's all these organizations across the province who are working to support social innovation and social entrepreneurship. So, businesses that make a positive impact, that increase this kind of social innovation. And so that's a network that we are connected to that we also are happy to bring others into. And hopefully we'll kind of be developing a community of practice out of some of that as well. Monique, do you want to add anything onto that?
The only thing I would say is, Hassam, if there is, so we've also participated in SVI, the Social Ventures Institute conference. And so if there are ideas or things that come out that become potentially a social entrepreneur or social social enterprise is what I was looking for, then we are happy to provide the kind of pipeline or funnel to support that individual so they can find the right places to go to get the right supports. And so that's kind of the extent at which we take that on, but we are absolutely part of that ecosystem and want to support social entrepreneurship, which in fact is happening a great deal out of some of the nonprofits that we're working with here in Calgary.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay. I think we're going to try and wrap it up unless I see some other questions. We've got a couple of last comments in the chat. George mentioned that he also liked the focus on community desirability over economic viability. And then Andrea mentioned that in Calgary, Momentum supports people to launch businesses at momentum.org. That's in the chat. And Kara has added that AB Seed or Alberta Seed offers a monthly drop-in. It's awesome. Okay, there's a whole bunch of things coming in right across the board for various opportunities for people. So I'm going to suggest that people check the chat on that. But unless there's anything else, we'll let Monique and Kelsey go, but just to thank them very much for the time that they spent with us this morning, and also for I think it's been very inspiring to see the way that you do things, and certainly in the Center for Architecture, I think we can learn a lot from your process. So thank you again for making time for us. And again, I invite people to follow us on Instagram so you can find out our next talk probably will be Rise, who does wonderful work in Lesotho and similar to what the Social Impact does. So thank you again, and thank you to everyone for attending, and we hope to see you at our next presentation. And sorry, just the last question. Yes, the presentation will be available. We'll post it onto our YouTube channel as soon as we can get it up there. And lots of thank yous coming in. So thank you, Monique, and thank you, Kelsey. And I'll just keep this open for a little bit, if so people can make sure that they can copy the chat.
Thank you, Douglas, for hosting us.
You're very, very welcome.
Thank
And
you, everyone.
I look forward to working with you.
Likewise.
Take care. And I will stop the recording.